What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Playing hard champions can be one of the most fun and exciting ways to play League of Legends for a lot of people, but playing a hard champion is really intimidating and honestly just hard. You're definitely going to lose a lot, and even at the end of all that you still might be terrible with them. So I'm here to help you answer just how long it takes to learn a hard champion. And along the way there's a lot of things you can learn about the differences between an easy champion and a hard champion too. As well, here's some of my favorite comments where I asked what off-meta champion you guys thought was god tier. Today's question is, what champion do you enjoy playing? And if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, hit the dislike. Anyways, let's get started. So in order to make this idea a whole lot more than just me playing 50 games on Azir and then sharing my experience, throughout the video, in order to give you guys the most accurate representation that can be applied to, on average, everyone, we did a statistical analysis of 10 champions that are generally on the easier side and 10 champions that are generally on the harder side, looking at the win rates of the champions versus the amount of games played with them. So to start things off, here are the data points we chose. I know this table is kind of just a bunch of disorganized numbers, but it's important to start here so that you guys know how we made the much more readable graphs later on. On the left side, you can see the 10 champions that we chose to represent the easy to play champions, and the 10 champions we chose to represent the hard to play champions at the bottom. It's not unlikely that you disagree with our selection of champions, but the main thing that's needed for this list is just that the easy champions we selected are easier than the hard champions we selected. That's it. That's all we need for this kind of data. It's about the comparison between the two, not about the discussion of whether or not you think Riven is hard to play or not. Anyways, on the left you can see the champion, and on the top you can see the amount of games played on that champion, and then in the individual boxes are the win rates of those champions in the amount of games played on them. For example, let's take a look at Warwick. From 1 to 5, he has a win rate of 50.85%, which means that someone playing Warwick who has played 1 to 5 games with him has an average win rate of 50.85%. And the same goes for 5 to 15, 15 to 50, 50 to 125, and 125 plus. So with all those numbers and statistics, we put together this beautiful graph. See, isn't that much easier to look at? By taking 20 total champions, all of which had multiple thousands of games of data, we can make reasonably accurate lines, since each line on the graph represents around 20 to 30, maybe even more, thousand games played across multiple different champions. So the two blue lines represent the easy champions, and the two red lines represent the harder champions. Right off the bat, you can see that on average, an easy champion will have a higher win rate than the harder champions by about 3% or so. Note that the flat lines show the average win rate of both easy and hard champions respectively across the board, regardless of games played on them. And so at this point, we have to define what it means to learn a champion. Like, how does a win rate tell you when someone has effectively learned a champion? Well, the way I see it is that when someone can play a champion at a level that is reasonably above average, that's when you can say that they've learned them, and the best way to do that is by looking at win rates. It doesn't mean that they've mastered the champion by any means at all, but it's fair to assume that someone with an above average win rate on any given champion is reasonably competent at playing them, at least on average across the board. And so first off, let's examine the easy champions. The overall win rate of the easy champions is about 51.5%, and taking a look at the graph, the win rate of people playing easy champions passes that average pretty early on at the 5 to 15 game mark, and peaks at the 15 to 50 game mark before dipping down again. I've always thought it was really interesting how easy champions have this dip in win rate after 50 games played, which is actually a very consistent dip in win rate, which doesn't take place in the harder champions at all. And I'm not 100% sure, but we think this occurs because easy champions typically have a lower skill ceiling. After you play an easy champion, there's only so much to learn until you become proficient at them. So at some point in time, your win rate plateaus, since those players need to get better at the game to win more, rather than to get better at the champion. Anyways, with this graph and win rates, the educated guess we can make is that on average, it's going to take you around somewhere about 15 games to learn an easy champion to the point where you are above average with them. This is judged by the dynamic graph, passing the average at around 5 to 10 games played and then peaking early on in the 15 to 50 category. Next, let's take a look at the harder champions. The overall average win rate of the hard champions is just a little bit over 48%. Taking a look at the graph, it constantly moves up the whole time, unlike the easy graph that has a little bit of a dip down, which shows that those champions have a much higher skill ceiling, since there's so much more to learn on them. One thing I thought was interesting is that at the very start of the graph, at 1 to 5 games played, the win rate is ridiculously below the overall average. In 1 to 4 games played, the win rate is almost 4% less than the average, compared to the easy champions that has a win rate of about 2% less than the average at that point. And for the hard champions, it doesn't really go up that much at all when it hits 5 to 15. However, between 5 to 15 and 15 to 50, there's a huge spike, as the win rate goes up by about 4% in that distance. And then after that, the rest of the graph, there's kind of like a slow climb up again. With this graph and win rates, the educated guess that we can make is that on average it's going to take you around somewhere, maybe like 35 games or so, to learn a hard champion well enough to play them at an above average level. This is judged by the dynamic graph spiking at 15 to 50, but slowing down a lot at the 50 to 125 category. By the way, although the dip in the easy champion graph might be a little bit hard to explain, I've actually found that it's a really good way to judge if a champion is easy to play or not. Like, this dip is difficult to explain, but for some reason, if they have that dip in win rate around 50 to 125 games played, they are very likely to be on the easy side. And if they just have a steady climb up, then they're probably a little bit more on the harder side. And if anyone wants to see the full spreadsheet of data, I'll link it in the description down below. And just to know that these stats were taken from patch 6.3 from Champion GG, and although that's like a tiny bit out of date, I guess, remember that it's really just about the comparison of the easy and hard champions, not the individual stats, and this was the best way to go about doing the analysis in my mind. So 35 games or so is what you should expect on average for you to learn a hard champion. Now, that doesn't mean that after those 35 games you have nothing to learn, or after, 35 games on an easy champion you have nothing to learn. There's always more things you can learn on a champion. But just keep in mind that this is really for the average, across the board for everyone, to play those champions at an above average level. So although this might be a great estimate to go off of, every individual is different and you might have better or worse results depending on yourself, how you click with the champion, and I guess just how fast of a learner you are. Anyways, that's just about it. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.